All right, 3 layers of muscles. You got 4 muscles in the superior superficial layer. You got 1 muscle in the middle layer, and then you got 3 in the deep layer. If you remember FPFP for the superficial layer, so 4 muscles, and they orientate kind of like that. If you get 4 fingers and you place it on your medial epicondyle and wrap it around, that's how it orientates. So going from medial to lateral, you've got your pronator teres. This one comes down from the supracondylar ridge and inserts into the radius. This out of here. Inserts into radius down here. You've got your palmaris longus. Oh no, so your flexor carpi radialis, which comes down and inserts into the base of that second metacarpal, so your pointing finger, and that comes from the medial epicondyle. Then you've got your palmaris longus, which comes from the medial epicondyle and attaches down into that palmar aponeurosis. And then you've got your flexor carpi ulnaris that comes from the lateral or the medial epicondyle and inserts into the 5th metacarpal, so your pinky. And then all of that is innervated by the median nerve, except for the flexor carpi ulnaris, which is innervated by the ulnar nerve. And you can see a biseptal aponeurosis is this kind of fibrous thing. And after this, we can go through the cubital fossa, that triangle thing again. If we hide this outer layer, we can get to the middle layer. This muscle is the flexor carpi superficialis. Nope, it's the flexor digitorum superficialis. Sorry, this one. So one of the main ones that flex your fingers comes from the lateral epicondyle. Nope, because the medial epicondyle. Medial epicondyle, interosseous membrane, and then the oblique line of the radius. So just under that radial tuberosity, and that inserts into the edges of the middle phalanges. Remember, it splits, it bifurcates, so that other tendon runs through in between it, and it's responsible for like partially flexing your fingers. And that's innervated by the median nerve. All the muscles in the anterior compartment of the forearm are innervated by the median nerve, except for the flexor carpi ulnaris, as well as the this one here, the flexor digitorum profundus. This is innervated by the median nerve and the ulnar nerve, and this comes from the top of the ulna and inserts into the distal phalanges. So this is the other muscle that helps flex the fingers. This one is responsible for the full flexion of the fingers, whereas the flexor digitorum superficialis is only responsible for the half flexion, and that's why you can bend your distal phalanges separately from your middle and proximal. Yep, so this one's innervated by median and the ulnar nerve. Next to it is your flexor pollicis longus, which is this one, and that inserts into the distal phalange of your thumb. And then lastly is the pronator quadratus here, which is responsible for pronation of your forearm at that distal radio-ulnar joint, and also innervated by the median nerve. Cool. I need, for the extensors of the forearm, you've got 2 layers, and those layers are divided up into 6 and 5. Firstly, even though it doesn't extend, but it's just a part of that compartment, is your brachioradialis, which is this one. This comes from the supracondylar ridge of the humerus, the lateral supracondylar ridge, and inserts into the distal radius here, and it's responsible for flexion of the forearm at mid-pronation. So it's that muscle you can see there, mid-pronate, that's when you can see it, that's when it activates. And that's innervated by the radial nerve. And then the rest are extensors of the forearm. You've got your extensor carpi radialis longus, which is this one. And this comes from the supracondylar ridge as well and inserts into the base of that second metacarpal. It's pretty much the opposite of the flexor carpi radialis, which inserts into the anterior base of the second metacarpal. So extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis is this next one. And this just comes from the lateral epicondyle, as opposed to the longus, which comes from the supracondylar ridge of the lateral epicondyle. And these are also innervated by the radial nerve. So your extensor carpi radialis longus brevis and your brachioradialis are innervated by the radial nerve. Everything else in the anterior compartment is innervated by the, everything else in the posterior compartment is innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve, which is a branch of the radial nerve. Next, you've got your extensor digitorum. One, and this comes and inserts into the distal phalanges and originates from that lateral epicondyle. Finicky. And then you've got your extensor digiti minimi, which is this small one here. And that comes from further down on the ulna. Oh no, sorry, this one attaches, comes from the lateral epicondyle as well. It's just hidden under everything. And like its name, it inserts into the distal phalanx of the pinky. And then lastly, you've got your extensor carpi ulnaris, which, like the flexor carpi ulnaris, originates from the lateral epicondyle and inserts into the base of the fifth metacarpal. And if you remember, the ulnarises are responsible for adduction of the wrist, so bringing your wrist towards midline, and then the flexors, the radialises are responsible for abduction, so bringing your wrist away from midline, as well as extension and flexion of the wrist. And then on the middle layer, you hide these. We've got 5 muscles on the middle layer. We've got firstly your supinator. So this one, coming from that supinator crest, as well as the lateral epicondyle, attaches to the lateral surface of the radius here, and it's responsible for supination of the forearm. And then you've got the muscles we were talking about earlier. You've got your abductor pollicis longus, which comes from the ulna and the interosseous membrane, runs down and inserts into the base of the metacarpal of the thumb. That's responsible for abduction of the thumb. Then you've got your extensor pollicis longus here. That comes from the ulna as well. Goes down, inserts into the distal phalanx of the thumb. And you can see it comes around this dorsal tubercle on the radius. And then you've got your extensor pollicis brevis, which comes from the radius, which is why it's shorter, as well as the interosseous membrane, and inserts into that proximal phalange of the thumb. And that's the one, those two are the ones you can see when you flex your thumb, when you abduct and extend your thumb, and make up that anatomical snuff box. And then lastly is your extensor indices, which is this muscle here, comes from the ulna as well, and inserts into that distal index finger. And all of those are innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve, which is a branch of the radial nerve, except for the brachioradialis and the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, which are just from the radial nerve. Yeah. So that's all forearm compartments. We can go over nerves afterwards as well, though I haven't gone over nerves in a while, so I might be winging it a little bit. if we hide all these, we can jump into the hand. So in the hand, you've got this superficial muscle here. This is the palmaris brevis, and it doesn't actually attach to anything. It attaches to the palmar aponeurosis, which at the moment is just cut away, as well as the skin. It's that muscle in there, and it's just used for grip. I don't think it has any other function. Besides that, they're divided into two groups. You've got your thenar muscles, which relate to your thumb, and your hypothenar muscles, which relate to your pinky finger. Each have the same muscle for names. The pollicis, or the thumb, has this here is the abductor pollicis. This is the abductor pollicis brevis, because remember the abductor pollicis longus is actually on the extensor side. It's this muscle up here, attaches to the posterior side, whereas the abductor brevis attaches to the anterior side. Beneath that is your flexor pollicis. This is your flexor pollicis brevis, because the flexor pollicis longus was the deep compartment of the forearm, which inserts into that distal phalanx, whereas this one only inserts into the proximal phalanx. And then beneath that is your opponens pollicis, which, if you remember what opposition is, it's bringing your pinky and your thumb together like that, so kind of out rather than across or down. And all of those are innervated by the median nerve, but the main innervation for the hand is the ulnar nerve. The only things that aren't innervated by the ulnar nerve are those thenar muscles and then the lateral three lumbricals. Everything else is innervated by the ulnar nerve. On the other side, you've got your digiti minimis. So you've got your abductor digiti minimi here. Beneath that, you've got your flexor digiti minimi, which is this one. And then lastly, you've got your opponens digiti minimi, which is this one. Beneath that, it's kind of weird to see, but the next layer is actually the adductors, so the adductors of the thumb, which is this one. You've got two heads. You've got your transverse head, this one that comes from that middle metacarpal and inserts into the proximal phalanx of the thumb. And then you've got that oblique head here, which comes from the metacarpal and the capitate, and that inserts into the same place, the proximal phalanx of the thumb. And these are innervated by the ulnar nerve. They're not related to the thenar muscles. Beneath that, are your lumbricals, which are these ones here. They come from the tendons of the flexor superficialis, flexor digitorum profundus, sorry. And that's kind of why they're floating, and they just attach to the bases of those distal phalanxes, and they're responsible for flexion of the metacarpal joints, or the metacarpal phalangeal joints, and that's why we can bend our fingers as well further separately or individually from your distal and your middle phalanxes, because these are responsible. And they're all innervated by the ulnar, except for these lateral two. These lateral two are innervated by the innervated by the median nerve. Ulnar is the main nerve of the hand, except for this kind of right side, except for the lateral side of the hand. And then a layer beneath that are your dorsal interosseous muscles, and they're responsible for abduction of the fingers, and they're all innervated by the ulnar nerve. And then on the other side, you've got your plantar interosseous muscles, and they're responsible for the same thing. I must have Whoa, removed them. Anyway, dorsal and plantar interosseous. The plantar, I think I just deleted by accident. Yeah, and that's the upper body. I hope it rejogged some people's memory. But yeah, if you go through this complete anatomy program, it makes it really easy to kind of visualize how it all looks. And not all of it's like the proper attachment. Some of it's kind of just like even some leeway, but yeah, we don't really need no attachments that intensely.
I think in the second year we'll have to, but they will take us through it then.
Yeah, it's like they said we had to revise breathing, but then they took us through breathing in the whatever unit it was that did breathing this week.
Yeah, the like intro number A or something.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the ASPA.
Yeah, that one.
Too bad though. All the lectures are kind of short.
Was it for week 3? Is it for week 3?
Yeah, week 3. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, okay.
No, yeah, it doesn't take too long. I think these ones are a lot more interesting. It's a lot more practical stuff rather than all that theory stuff that we went through for the first 2 weeks. That was pretty grim. Cool. Then we can quickly go over the arteries. If you remember,
Probably arteries and nerves is the hardest 2 things to remember.
Yeah. So if you remember, the main 2 arteries for the arm are the cephalic and the basilic. So the cephalic is the lateral one, runs down here. And then the basilic is this one. Oh, whoa, no, that's veins, excuse me.
Yeah, veins. Getting confused.
Sorry, we'll start with we'll do full body. Oh, we'll do full body and then go through it. Trip myself up. Now we can get rid of these muscles. Awesome. Okay, so sternum. Remember, we've got our different sections of the aorta. We've got our ascending aorta, which is this first part, this part, and then it comes to the aortic arch where we start getting all these branches. This main branch. I think I can try this bit. There we go. The main branch here is your brachiocephalic trunk, and that comes up and bifurcates into the common carotid artery, which goes up to your brain, and then the subclavian artery, which comes across over to your shoulder, and then this one is your vertebral artery, which, as you can see, goes through those vertebral foramens in the vertebrae, and that's what innervates those back of the head, those occiput, applies blood to the occiput and all those muscles that we'll go through later on if we do a back anatomy revision. So it goes brachiocephalic, common carotid goes up to the brain, subclavian comes across, comes the axillary artery. Axillary artery becomes the brachial artery once it passes that teres major. Comes down through the cubital fossa, and that's where it splits into the radial and the ulnar arteries. Radial comes across through that snuff box and becomes the deep palmar artery, these ones. And then the ulnar artery comes along and becomes the superficial palmar arteries. I can't remember what this is, circumflex or something. Who cares? I doubt we need to know that.
Is it the 6 branches thing of the axillary?
Yeah, isn't it the
Yeah.
humeral circumflex?
Anterior humeral circumflex.
Yeah. With veins, we've got your basilic vein, which is this one that I got confused with earlier, and that runs down the medial side, and then you got your cephalic, and that runs down here. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Yeah, it runs down here. And then all the major ones follow the same. These are the major ones, sorry, all the minor ones. I can't remember what those. These are the superficial veins. They're the cephalic and the basilic. And then all the deep veins follow the arteries. So they're the exact same as the arteries. And then in terms of nerves, I haven't done nerves yet because I don't need to yet for teaching. But if you remember, there's that M, I think here. This is it. You got your brachial plexus coming from C6, C7, C8, and C8, T1, C7, C6, C5. So the C5 and C6 become the musculocutaneous nerve, which innervates the anterior compartment. C8 and T1 become the median nerve.
Median nerve, yeah.
And then the ulnar nerve comes from something. Something I'm sure of it, but I can't remember. I don't think we need to know too much about what's going on with the nerves, but in here we will, if I get the arteries back up. You remember that there was the cubital fossa, which was that triangle, which had 4 things running through it. The acronym for it was MBBR, from medial to lateral. It's because you've got your median nerve coming through here. Then you've got your brachial artery coming through here. The second B is your biceps tendon that comes through. And then you've got your radial nerve coming through as well. I can get a picture of that. Got it here. Once you see it, it'll definitely click with you. I can't find it. Here we go. Do this. Sure. Do you guys see this?
Yep.
Yep. So remember, this is the median cubital fossa. This is where they draw blood from. Draw blood from the veins that come through here. But yeah, if you remember, you got your MBBR, so you got your median nerve coming through here. Then you've got your brachial artery coming through here, and that's where it bifurcates into the ulnar and the radial artery. You got your biceps tendon coming through, and then you've got your radial nerve coming through here. And I think this is where it splits as well. And then your ulnar nerve is here apparently. There. Yeah. And that's the upper arm. Questions? Thoughts, opinions?
I feel like with the nerves, we don't need to know them in detail now, but I feel like when we do our neuro unit later on, it'll be important just because like knowing the sensation areas probably would help with diagnosis.
Yeah, I think they'll run us through that again because we didn't learn much of dermatomes and stuff from what I remember in anatomy. They just kind of gave us a picture.
Dermatomes was literally like the last lecture. They just gave like one little picture. They're like, "Here, remember this."
Yes, 2 seconds.
Okay.
What nerve innervates is? I'm sure to know.
And it's so like vague because each one like has different like regions.
Yeah.
Each picture.
Yeah, it's like if I recall, the radial nerve like innervates only the back of the hand.
Yeah.
On the finger and thumb, where the median nerve innervates the inner.
I think it would be a lot easier to learn it when you apply it because with that one, it's actual testing. So you test from the dermatome to see which nerve is affected.
Yeah.
So I think that would be cool to actually learn.
I guess while we're here, we can go over the rest of the blood supply to reference.
Also, I think I just remembered for the superficial veins, there's also the median cubital.
Yeah. that connects the cephalic and the basilic, because that's the one they
Yeah.
draw blood from.
Yeah.
It's like this one. Oh, antebrachial, this one.
That
There
one,
it is,
yeah.
medial cubal. Yes, that's where they draw blood from. Sick.
The hardest
Yeah.
area.
And then the last part of the aorta becomes the descending aorta. This breaks into your common iliacs. Common iliacs come down, split into your internal and external. Internal goes into like supply the genitals and the pudendal arteries. And then the external comes down. Go through it when we do legs, but it comes through the femoral triangle, where it breaks off to become the posterior femoral nerve artery here, and then this comes through as the femoral artery. Femoral artery goes through that adductor hiatus of that adductor magnus. If you remember what those muscles were. Yep, the adductor hiatus of the adductor magnus. And that's where it becomes the popliteal artery at the back. That goes to the popliteal fossa, and that's where it becomes the tibial artery. And then that splits here into the anterior tibial artery and the posterior tibial artery. And that posterior tibial comes down and innervates the bottom of the foot. So you got your left and right, you got your medial and lateral plantar arteries. And then the front is your dorsal pedis artery.